police are the first ones to get called into action whenever trouble arises, and they'll no doubt see some disturbing stuff. Here are 4 haunting stories of former police officers. Number 4. I was a cop for 30 years. I retired at the age of 50, so of course I had some weird calls. But I'll never forget the night that me and my partner Steve were called to respond to a domestic abuse report. The call was made by a neighbor. These calls were never really a big deal. It usually gave us something to do during the night. Not that I enjoyed dealing with couples fighting and all that stuff. So we arrived at the house. I still vividly remember the address, and I remember the door was left wide open. The second we stepped inside, the strong scent of marijuana filled our lungs. It was everywhere. Not just marijuana though. There was a strong smell of chemicals, which we assumed was either meth or cocaine. We made our presence known by asking for the couple to come out into sight. A thump from the upstairs gave away their position. Steve had his hand on his holster, ready to pull his gun. But me? I wasn't nervous yet. Steve told me to move quietly up the stairs. We normally listen to each other, so I humored his paranoia. There were 3 doors, 2 open and 1 closed. The closed door led in the direction where the thud in the ceiling was. I banged on the door before swinging it open myself. The smell was the first thing we noticed. Then the body. The body was very obviously rotted. We knew even in the dark. We pulled our guns. Steve turned on the light. I told him to scan that room while I scanned the rest of the house. I was shaking all over now. I hated my job at that moment. I wanted to run back to the car and leave. I was sure I could die at any moment. I found my hand to be stuck on the doorknob until I finally had the balls to turn it and push the door open with force. I turned the light on, but there was nobody inside. It was a disturbingly tiny room. No windows and no furniture, except for a dirty old cot. Steve suddenly screamed, and I rushed across the hall to see what was going on. There was some shirtless guy laying flat above one of the dressers in the room. We had him at gunpoint, yelling at him to come down, when something grabbed my ankle and tried to pull me to the floor. There was a hand coming from under the bed. I stomped on the arm with my other foot and pulled out a frail, trashy-looking woman who was obviously baked. I cuffed her and Steve cuffed the man. We were on our way outside with the 2 crazies screaming at us, but we had one final surprise coming. Some psycho from upstairs started screaming, charging at us down the stairs with a knife raised in the air. Steve reacted just fast enough to save my ass by 2 seconds, shooting the guy dead. This was a crack house. Somehow none of the neighbors could smell anything suspicious. The dead woman on the bed was killed by the man of the 2 we caught, who admitted to killing her due to lack of payment. The man was sentenced to life without parole. The woman was sentenced to 30 years. Steve says he never felt bad about what he did. He says he just rid the world of one more piece of trash. Number 3. Myself and a buddy on my squad responded to an alarm. The incident location was an old office-type building that had been converted to a doctor's office. There was a pharmacy attached to it as well. Our dispatch received a motion signal from an upstairs office. The key holder arrives on the scene and we go in to secure the building. The stairs were locked behind a door that, of course, the key holder didn't have a key to, so we took the elevator up to the 2nd floor. The elevator opens to a pitch-black hallway, except for one overhead light at the end of the hall. We start checking the doors, and so far, all are secured. We get to the last office, and sure enough, the door is unlocked. We make entry and observe it to be an unused office. The door opened to a sizable waiting room and reception area. There were about 10 or 12 exam rooms, all cleared with no hiccups. We exit the office, and immediately, something seems off. That's when I realized the overhead light at our end of the hallway that was on before had been turned off. It was replaced by another light over at the elevators. I look at my squad mate and he's completely white. I ask him what's wrong, and he says, "Weren't all those doors we just checked closed and locked?" I tell him, "Yeah, so?" My buddy says, "Well, now they're all standing open." Sure enough, all the offices down the hallway we had just checked were now standing open. The pucker factor sinks in at this point, so we start clearing and securing offices. We finished the last office, and on our way out, just before we turned the corner to get into the waiting area, the main door just slammed shut. Then our radio started going nuts with some kind of static feedback. Now I just want to get the hell out of there. We get back in the elevator and head down to the first floor in hopes to make contact with the key holder again. However, the key holder is nowhere to be found. I contact dispatch and request a callback number for the key holder so I can advise him of what we found. Dispatch states that the key holder was still en route to us and was advising an ETA of 5 minutes. I advised dispatch that we had already been out with the key holder. Dispatch requests I give them a call. I call dispatch, and she tells me that there is no way we were out with the key holder. She states that the alarm company had only just made contact with one. Eventually, the real key holder arrives on the scene, and I ask her about the man that had let us in the building. She asked me to describe him, so I did. She states that sounds like one of the doctors that used to lease the office on the second floor at the end of the hall. She then states that he had committed suicide at his summer home several days ago. Number 2. I was responding to a call in the village. A resident was reporting noises coming from one of the abandoned buildings from across the street, most likely trespassing. I arrived and began my search in the building. It used to be a 2-story convenience store. Now it was completely stripped empty, except for the parts attached to the floor, like the counter and shelves. The lights didn't work in there either. I checked every small aisle for anyone to possibly be hiding in, and then I did the same thing upstairs. It was completely empty. On my way back into my car, I looked back at the building and saw somebody at the window on the second floor. It was a woman with long gray hair down past her shoulders. She was no doubt looking down at me with a wide smile on her face. I hurried back inside, making it upstairs in no more than 10 seconds. But the window was clear. There was nobody in sight. I checked all 3 aisles at least 10 times. I checked behind the counter. I checked the bathroom. It was clear. I was a little nervous, so I left again, thinking my mind was fooling me. I looked back at the window, and there she was again. The same mockingly disturbing smile on her face. I went back up there again, this time running around all 3 aisles trying to find this woman. I was about to give it up once more and leave for good when I noticed something in my peripheral vision. It was on the ceiling. A dark shade of black latched onto the ceiling. I shined my light up there, and there she was. That crazed woman looked at me, still with a horrifying smile on her face, as she held onto 2 hook-like objects in the ceiling with her hands, while her feet were pushed up against the tile to gain support. She laughed like a freak all the way down to the station. I don't know if she had some kind of mental disability or not. It seemed like she was just toying with me, but not at all in a good way. She stared me down through the mirror the whole ride. Number 1. In all my years of being a police officer in Floyd County, Georgia, I had only experienced 2 horrifying situations. I'll share with you the worst of the 2. It was a slow night, and I was patrolling the dirt roads in my cruiser. At this particular spot, there were tiny woods on both sides of the road. And then it all started. I spotted somebody jumping into the woods on the left. I only saw half of them though. They were gone so quickly. I pulled up closer and shined a spotlight into the woods. I didn't see them. Unfortunately, it was kind of my job to check on things like this, so I hesitantly stepped out from the car and began searching. In a moment like this, I was so ready to pull my gun, as I was actually terrified. And then, the cliched snap of a branch from behind a tree almost made me want to run back to the car, but I instead did my job and called for them to come out. Someone wearing a mask stepped out from the tree. I told them to raise their arms, take off their mask, and come to me slowly. They raised their hands, but they didn't remove the mask. I tried to demonstrate my authority by yelling this time, ordering them to take it off. They looked as if they were about to take it off, when suddenly, he or she looked to their left, and then back at me. I heard footsteps coming from my right. I drew my gun. I yelled as loud as I could for everybody to come out with their hands up. You may be thinking, why? Well, if you were in this position, in this setting, you would have been shitting yourself just like I was.
Am I the only one in this fight?
Another person wearing a mask walked over, this one holding an axe. I had my gun locked on him. But suddenly, footsteps started coming from all directions. I looked around, and I was surrounded. There were at least 10 strangers wearing masks, surrounding me almost in a circle, with only an opening behind me. Half of them were armed with axes and light. I stood there, gun raised, but not even aimed at anything at this point. I felt like I was going to throw up. One of them, I'm not sure which, finally broke the silence, telling me in a muffled, deep voice, "Go away." My heart dropped as he said this, in a way that I knew I was going to live. I turned and ran for the car, driving down the road half a mile, all while calling for backup. As you would guess, the whole group was gone from the woods when a search squad arrived. I have a theory on this, however. I believe that what I witnessed was some kind of fucked up secret society that was planning on trapping an innocent passerby, and I think that whoever jumped into the woods as I was passing recognized my car as a police car and tried to hide. Had I not been a police officer, I believe they would have stopped me, led me to the woods, and done whatever this group does for its sick kicks.
I'll walk right through you.
I was 23 years old when this happened. I'm 27 now, and there hasn't been a week that has gone by that I haven't thought about this trip. To celebrate our friend Andrew's 21st birthday, we were taking him on a trip to Vegas. He was always a laid-back and kind of shy dude, and we all knew that he hadn't yet done the deed, so we planned on getting him really drunk and to put it bluntly, get him laid. We checked into the Carriage House Hotel, which was one of the more affordable hotels that we could find. We had 2 separate rooms as there were 7 of us in total. There were 4 of us in the room that I was in. Andrew was in the room with us. The first thing we did was eat, of course, as we were all starving. We then hit the casinos just to say that we did it. Out of the 7 of us, only one of us left with more money than entering. We checked out a bunch of different bars, and as the night went on, things got more blurry and everything got funnier. We got into a nightclub that was going wild. We caught 2 of our friends, John and Eddie, walking out with girls. They shot us the about to get lucky look, and we understood. The rest of us were trying to pressure Andrew into approaching a girl. But even in his drunk and somewhat loosened up state, he was still too shy to approach anybody or even dance. We got to the point where we were desperate to find somebody for Andrew. We could already foresee that he wouldn't meet any girls at this rate the whole trip. We left the club in search for a working girl. You may think our actions were weird, but as most people were by that time, we were completely hammered. We approached the girl walking alone, acting like a couple of retards, asked the girl if she would be interested in hanging out with our friend Andrew, who was very noticeably not quite as messed up as us, but still intoxicated nonetheless. The girl wasn't anything special. I could say that even in the state I was in, but we wanted Andrew to have a good time. I don't quite remember what she said in direct response to me, but I remember her voice being slightly deep to the point that I looked at my friend. I also have this slight memory of her analyzing Andrew from head to toe. Again, I don't remember what she said, but it led to her grabbing Andrew's arm and the 2 of them walking off down the sidewalk. We laughed as we could see how awkward Andrew already felt. None of us thought it was weird what just happened though. But just out of curiosity, to see what was going to go down, we decided to trail behind them. They didn't seem to exchange any words. In fact, it appeared as if the girl was pulling him. We followed for about 15 minutes, I would guess. It could have been much longer, but I wouldn't really know. It was a darker and quieter street. The 2 of them stepped into what we assumed was an apartment building, and we all laughed. but we were so proud and happy for him too. There was no point in us waiting there, so we went back to the club. At around 2 in the morning, we headed back to the hotel. Andrew wasn't in either of the rooms. I was starting to sober up a little, and a bit of concern began to arise in me. John and Eddie, who weren't with us earlier, were shocked to hear about what happened. We all kind of assumed Andrew was just spending the night with the girl. Still, it was out of character for Andrew doing anything like this, so it was just weird. I texted him and tried calling him. He never answered, but my friends told me to relax. I crashed minutes later. I woke to a ringing sound. At first, with my mind still in sleep mode, I assumed it to be an alarm clock and tried tapping at my phone to turn it off. As my head began to return to reality, I realized the phone was ringing. It was Andrew's number. I literally felt my heart drop for whatever reason. I told my friends, who were already awake from the ringing. I answered, and was greeted to heavy breathing on the other end. It was Andrew. He sounded as if he were having some kind of panic attack. I put him on speakerphone so everyone could hear. Andrew began whispering into the phone. Most of it was incomprehensible, but we made out some of what he said. We heard him whisper,
"Who's that woman? Guys, you gotta get over here right now."
We tried to engage him, but wasn't answering anything we were saying. The other end went silent. We were all basically screaming into the phone, asking if he was alright, where he was, what was going on. I was already shaking in my skin at that point, but what happened next only made it 10 times worse. Something broke the silence on the other end. The sound of a door being opened with force, followed by the shrill and horrific screaming of Andrew, before the sound of the call ended. We were all freaking the fuck out. I called the police and tried to remember the address, or at least the street. We were so messed up last night that I couldn't even remember the route that we took. One of my friends claimed he did, though. The police came over to the hotel and they escorted us. My friend seemed to remember exactly where the building was. He guided the police past the club, down the side roads, and eventually to the building. 2 officers from the front car went inside. We were to wait by the other car. A few minutes felt like hours, waiting in anticipation and in fear of the worst. One of the officers stepped out. She came over to us and asked us to come inside to confirm if the dead body belonged to Andrew. I felt like the entire world just collapsed on my head as John and Jerry both started crying. They didn't want to go in, so I followed the officer into the building, which turned out wasn't an apartment at all, rather some kind of dark, abandoned storage building. There was the dead body, leaning out from the open closet, the emotionless face, mouth lifelessly hung open, staring up at the ceiling. It was horrible, but it wasn't Andrew. I knew it right away. The most noticeable feature, this boy had blonde hair, while Andrew had black hair. The officers had already scoped the whole place out, so they didn't know what to do. I took a look in the closet that I had a feeling Andrew was hiding in. Nothing. Not even his cell phone. We all did our best to forget about it, but a little more than a month later, I got a phone call during the middle of the night once again. I picked up. There was a bad reception and nobody was saying anything. I was about to hang up when a faint yet familiar voice said,
"Jesse?"
"Andrew?" I yelled. The sound of a door slamming in the background on the other end was the last thing I heard before the call ended. He didn't pick up after the 5 times I tried ringing him. So what did I do? I called the police and had them trace the call. The call was not coming from Nevada at all. No, it was coming from New Jersey. In fact, our own town, and a house not too far away. They said they were sending somebody to the house, but that wasn't enough for me. I had to go there myself. I GPSed that address, hopped in my car, and floored it the whole 5 minutes it took to reach the address. It was a vacant house on a corner. I sneaked up to the front door and put my ear against it to listen for anything inside. Nothing. I crawled around back where I found an open window. I listened for a moment. There were the sounds of small snaps and cracks from upstairs, the kinds of sounds you hear from somebody standing or moving on wood. I was sure that he was in there. I hopped inside, but I didn't even get to begin my search before noticing something at the edge of the hallway. Somebody was standing there, facing me, but I couldn't see their face. All I could see were their pale, exposed legs and long black hair down past their shoulders. It was a woman. I was feeling sick to my stomach, anticipating her charging up to me like in some kind of horror movie. But instead, she turned and ran in the opposite direction. I heard the sound of a door slamming shut, followed by footsteps stomping downstairs, and then yelling of a man and woman. There was an even heavier pair of footsteps now stomping up the stairs. That was my cue to run. I left the house and dove into the bush. Not even 5 seconds later, someone stepped out onto the porch, and for the first time in months, it seemed as if luck was finally on my side, as a police car pulled up to the curb, flashing its siren. I heard the guy in the stoop mutter, "Shit," before slamming the door behind himself. The police followed inside. Apparently the idiot didn't even lock the door. I stayed hidden, as I didn't want to startle the cops and end up with a bullet in my skull. I waited by the car out front, and minutes later, one of the officers came outside with the guy in cuffs. I introduced myself and warned that there was also a woman in there, but they never found the woman. In fact, one of the bedroom windows were completely open, which implied that she escaped. Andrew was found upstairs, locked in a closet. He was in horrible shape, malnourished, hair long and dirty. You could smell him from a mile away. The police ran the records for the man. He was never married, so they really had no way of finding out who the woman was. He even claimed that he had only known her for a day. Nothing made sense, and it still doesn't. Andrew admitted that he was raped, beaten, and hardly fed. I can't even imagine admitting something like that to someone. The girl that originally escorted him to that building was only there to collect payment from what he described as the operators. For some reason, they forced Andrew to give them his hometown and addresses of everyone that was with him that night, which explained why they were in our town, but not actually why they were in our town. Like, what their intentions were. To kill us? To add us to whatever kind of sex slave operation they were running? I'm the only person he's told out of our group of friends, and whenever somebody asked about it, I just said I don't know what happened. Things were finally starting to look up, when a few days later, I got a text message from a random number one late night, saying, "Fuck you." Whoever it was blocked me, as I couldn't respond, so I just blocked them back. It happened again the next week, and then the next month. Sure, I had the idea that it had something to do with the incident, but I had no idea it would be taken as far as it was. I woke up one night with a hint of brightness in my room. There was light from outside, in the backyard, shining ever so slightly through the closed blinds. It wasn't sunlight. It was the backyard porch light. I could see a shadow moving in front of the blinds. Somebody was definitely out there. I couldn't really see out of the crack at the bottom of the blind, so I inched it up ever so slightly. There was somebody standing by the window, looking right at me, as if they were waiting for me. But they were gone before I could even think about grabbing my phone to get a picture of them. I strongly believe it was that woman I saw in the house. That was the last time I saw or heard from anyone involved in this shit. Nothing of this whole situation has made a single ounce of sense, even with the best explanation Andrew could give me. I don't see a point in getting into how Andrew and everyone else is doing, as it's nothing interesting. The only thing I can say is I'm waiting for the next time I see any of these animals, and I'll be ready to call the police or take them on myself.
I'm putting them down double time!
Number 3. My dad has been an MTA Transit subway station manager for 35 years. With this job, there has to be a manager on duty at all times, so he's practically done every single possible shift throughout his career. That means he's done his fair share of night shifts. Most trains were completely empty throughout the night. He said it was the only nice part about doing the night shift. He has a series of funny and weird night shift stories to tell, but there's one downright horrifying one. My dad had just boarded the train to move to his office at another station. He was alone when he got on, which was at about 3 in the morning. At the next station, someone boarded. My dad describes him as a white, tall and skinny man wearing a heavy jacket and beanie. He shot my dad a quick glance before sitting in the furthest corner away from him. My dad said that he felt uncomfortable as the guy kept looking up at him every so often. When my dad stopped him, he got off, as well as the other man. He walked to his office door, unlocked it, and looked behind him. The man in the jacket was pacing around only about 50 feet away. My dad stepped into his office, shut the door, locked it, and sat at his desk. 5 minutes later, someone started to try and turn the doorknob. After the person on the other side of the door realized it was locked, they started to knock softly. My dad called out, "Who is it?" And they responded, "I want to talk." He told whoever it was to go away. He says he knew trouble when he saw it. He had a good feeling it was the guy from the train, as this station at a time like this was apparently always completely empty. My dad told the guy to go away. He continued to knock for a good 5 minutes. My dad finally pulled up the security camera screens and brought up the camera pointed to his office door. Sure enough, there was the guy from the train, wearing the jacket and beanie. Coincidentally, as soon as my dad brought up the camera, the man walked away. So my dad did whatever his work consisted of for about half an hour in that office. Before leaving to catch the next train, he checked the camera to make sure that the weird guy wasn't out there. He locked up and walked down the stairs to the train platform, where he got on the train right away. Looking out the window, he saw the guy from before walking down the stairs to the platform, and then stepping on the train into the same car as my dad. He sat down on the opposite side, a few seats to the right. My dad tried to look away and pretend not to notice him, but he knew the guy was staring at him. He at one point gave in and stared back, giving a slight nod and smile in some sort of truce attempt before looking away again. The man stared at my dad the whole ride to the next station, but my dad never looked back at him once after the first time. Now you may be asking, why didn't he try to forcibly get the guy to back off? Well, despite my dad's intimidating size, he's always been a complete teddy bear, no bark and no bite. Plus, he says he feared that guy was armed, and that one small motion could lead to death. When the train stopped at the station, my dad practically ran all the way back up to the streets, constantly glancing over his shoulder, and yes, the man from the train was following him. My dad had to find the first public building still open to try and escape. He found a Wendy's that was open and stepped inside. He sat and watched as the guy following him walked up to the window, stopped, and stared my dad down through the glass for about 10 seconds before turning around and walking across the street and then down the sidewalks. My dad said he ate, waited a little longer, then left the Wendy's to get to his third and final station for the night. The scariest part, when my dad was in his third office, as he was checking the security cameras out of the paranoia of the situation, he caught the guy from the train pacing around the outside, only about 30 feet from his office. He then stopped, looked up at the camera, and according to my dad, literally froze and stared for no less than a minute. When he finally lowered his head, he walked away out of the station to never be seen by my dad again. My dad doesn't know if he was followed after leaving the Wendy's, but that would only make sense. The guy was clearly disturbed, possibly homeless and or dangerous, and who knows what he actually wanted with my dad. Number 2. Me and my 3 friends were in New York around Christmas time. We didn't finally decide to leave until about maybe 2 in the morning. We got on the first train that we could catch, and as expected, it was empty. We were pretty sobered up by then. Then there was a sudden commotion in the next car over. We had peeked through the glass in between the cars, and there were two hooded men, or maybe teenagers, standing obnoxiously close to a woman sitting in one of the seats who was screaming for help. I suggested that we go over and kick their asses, but as me and a buddy got a closer look, we saw they were armed with handguns. I pushed all my friends to get to the next car over, away from the armed men. I took a look back and saw one of the men pointing at us before starting to follow. We ran through at least 3 different cars with the men following us before the train finally stopped at the next station. We all booked it through the old station to the nearest place we could hide. I got separated from my friends, so I went to hide behind a garbage can. I could hear my chaser's shoes hitting the tiled floors, so I knew I had no time to find a better hiding spot. I peeked through the opening at the top of the bin. I could get a better look at them now. One was black, the other was Indian, and they were both really young looking. I was sure they were only trying to rob us, until I heard one of them say, "If you find them, kill them." I hope you understand why I almost gave away my position in reaction to hearing this. With a gasp and almost pulling the garbage bin down with me as I returned to cover, I consider it a miracle neither of them caught me. They left the area. I took notice that they didn't have their guns drawn at that moment. I ran in the opposite direction of the two, and quickly caught my friends who were waving me over from behind a large pole. I took cover with them behind another pole not far from that one, and we waited for as long as we thought necessary. The big shock to this story, though, was when we caught glimpse of the woman from the train, who we thought was being threatened by the 2 men, walking over in the direction of the men, and then calling something along the lines of, "Where are they? Don't tell me you didn't get them." The 2 men reappeared from beyond a corner, walking over to the woman. The rest of what they said was too low to pick up on. They walked back down the stairs to the platforms, and as we could guess, waited for another train to run their trap again. At the very least, we called the police and reported what was going on, but I have no idea if they were ever caught. Number 1. My name is Danny. I'm 22 years old, and this was the most horrifying experience of my life. I live and work in New York City, but I don't have a car, so my main mode of transportation is the subway. It was a Saturday night. I was on my way home from a party in the middle of the night. I did this about every other weekend, so I was completely fine with taking the subway alone at night. Walking down the steps, entering the underground without a soul in sight, it was always a bit chilling. This specific station was very tightly spaced. As I was walking, I could almost feel as if I were being watched or followed, along with the occasional echoing bang-type sound emitting from an unknown location. I was early for the train, so I sat on a bench and waited. This is something straight out of a horror movie. I heard this exact phrase. "Psst, over here, buddy." There was somebody standing on the tracks inside the tunnel, poking his head out and looking at me. It was a filthy-looking man, I'd say in his early 40s. He gave me a smile, a horrible yellow smile with at least 3 teeth missing, and I could tell that even from where I was sitting. I did the best I could to pay no attention to him, but he wouldn't go away. There was laughing coming from inside the tunnel, and then another disgusting-looking man stuck his face out as well. This man gave me a nasty smile as well, before telling me to come hang out with them in the tunnel. The way they stared at me, though, their eyes wouldn't even move. It's as if their sight was locked onto me. I resumed doing the best I could to ignore them and just wait for the train. I noticed in my peripheral vision that one of the men moved away into the tunnel, returning moments later with another face. I had to look again. There was a third face, but this one was hunched over and lifeless. It looked like one of the men were holding the guy's face up. The sound of the train approaching felt like 1,000 pounds off my shoulders. I got up ready to board the train, but when I got closer to the edge of the platform, I nearly threw up at the sight. The 2 men were going back into the tunnel, but the second man in the back was holding something in his hand. A head. Just a head. like a decapitated head. They disappeared from sight onto the side of the tunnel. As the train stopped, I got into the first car, planning on warning the conductor, but no later than after we left the station. I didn't want to be there a second longer. As the train began to move, I saw legs moving down the stairs to the platform, but that was it. I didn't get to see who it was, but what I did get to see, as the train moved into the tunnels, I caught a glimpse of a group of men, hunched up against the railing, inches away from the train window, and they were all looking right at me. I knocked on the conductor's door like a madman, screaming it was an emergency. He opened up and I explained what I just saw. He radioed to somebody in charge of the station, as well as another higher-up of the company, who I'm sure took care of it, or contacted the proper authorities or security, whatever. It seemed to take ages for my stop to come, but when it did, I practically had a hop in my walk from relief. I have since been to one party at the same friend's house, but I skipped that station. I decided it was worth it to take the extra long walk to the next station. I don't know if weird shit happens often in the subway at night. In my experience prior to this incident, it never did. But after this experience, I think I should say you should be extremely cautious when in an isolated place like a subway station late at night. From plates being pulled off tables to pets acting as if they sense an unwanted presence, here are 10 freaky alleged poltergeists caught on video. Number 10. This was the footage captured on CCTV in the Carlisle Castle Hotel. The first camera shows a small dining area where a white transparent figure resembling a person is seen waving its arm in front of the camera. This goes.
Imagine being able to build an app with your name on it, just by thinking about it. Meet Base 44.
There used to be a pond about half a mile away from my old house that I would commonly go fishing in. It was nicknamed Daryl's Pond. I still have no idea who Daryl was or why it was called that, but nobody owned it, so people would once in a blue moon go fishing there as well. It was usually me by myself though. I had dug a pole into the ground where I would tie a noose to and from my small kayak. I'd say it was about 3 in the afternoon when I rowed out to the middle of the pond, the sweet spot for getting a decent catch. There was another person coming out from the trees. I waved at him and gave him a smile. He hopped into a small boat floating by the edge of the pond and began to row over to me. As he got close enough where trying to speak to him wouldn't come off as obnoxious, I gave him a friendly, "Perfect day, isn't it?" "Yes, absolutely," he said. He didn't say anything after that, and I started to feel a bit awkward, as if I were obligated to keep some kind of conversation rolling now. "So, you come out here to throw some lines?" I asked. "No, I don't actually fish." "Oh, well, it's never a bad day to relax in the pond," I said. He continued to row closer to me until his boat collided with mine, creating a big thud. I was genuinely uncomfortable now. I didn't feel threatened, just weirded out. I was only 24 years old. This guy looked like he was late 40s or 50s. There was an awkward silence. I tried to just act like I was focused on trying to make a catch, but by now that wasn't even on my mind. This guy was weird. I didn't know what he wanted, and I was uncomfortable being so close to him. I felt him looking at me, or at least in my direction, as I faced halfway to the opposite direction of him. I took a quick glance to my right. Yeah, he was staring at me. I decided to be ballsy and lock eye contact with him. After about 4 seconds, he looked away. "So, where are you from?" I asked him. "Up there." He pointed behind himself, in the direction of the woodsy hill leading past the dirt road. "Oh, you live by Suffolk?" I asked. No, I'm not," he said. "What made you decide to come out here?" I said. "Why not?" I continued to try and uncomfortably fill the awkward silences that kept coming up. His responses were dry. He didn't contribute anything to what was barely a conversation. He just sat there not doing anything, with half a smile on his face, looking either at me or in my general direction throughout. I was creeped out. My heart was racing at this point. I'd go as far as saying that I was nervous for my life. We were surrounded by trees in all directions in the middle of the pond. I started to row a bit closer to land, but in a very low-key kind of way, trying to play it off as me just trying to find a better spot to find some fish. I was horrified when I saw he was following me. "What a great day, huh?" I felt a shake in my voice. I got close enough to the edge of the pond where I finally told the man, "I think I'm gonna call it a day." I turned to see his reaction. He was still staring at me, but his smile was gone now. "I can't let you leave," he said. He lifted his flannel to expose a handgun sticking out of his jeans pocket. As soon as I could process what I was looking at, I dove out of the boat for land, ran the whole half-mile uphill through the woods back to my house, and locked every door and window as soon as I made it home. I pulled down the blinds to the dining room window, leaving it open just a crack for peeking outside undetected. It started to get dark out, and I left every light in the house off, still peeking out to the front yard, making sure I wasn't followed. The time came when I finally decided I wasn't followed. I realize now, like you, that not calling the police immediately was a huge mistake.
This must be some kind of wreck.
I kept my bedroom windows open to let the room air out. My bedroom was on the second floor, so I wasn't worried about being watched through the window. About half an hour after shutting the light and falling under the covers, I heard the sound of leaves crunching from outside. I sat up to hear it more clearly. It was definitely something walking around out there. Normally I would assume it was a deer or a bear, but after what just happened, I was still in paranoia mode. I sat up as still as a statue, except for my shaking out of fear, waiting as the sounds of the steps stopped. "Hey buddy, you up there? Are you trying to sleep?"
It's all of them.
"Sorry, I didn't mean to wake you." I felt like 100 pounds just fell directly onto my chest. It was the same voice. I knew it right away. I didn't make a sound. I crept out of the room quietly downstairs to the kitchen and grabbed the phone, practically crawling on my way out to avoid being seen through the open blinds. I called 911 like I should have earlier in the temporary safety of my bedroom. I made sure to whisper into the phone, as I was still hoping that he hadn't yet heard or spotted me. 20 minutes felt like an hour as I sat behind my bed, waiting for the police to arrive in constant fear that I would hear glass breaking from downstairs, or a thud on the back door, or even just a voice again from down below my window outside. The police did a thorough investigation of the property in nearby woods, turning up nothing. They suggested I stay with a friend or a family member for a few days, and so I did. I never heard from or saw the man again, but I still moved a month later. I couldn't deal with the constant fear and paranoia of being watched through my windows. I feel much more comfortable fishing out by the bay now.
Full as a tick.
There was this one time I joined my brother-in-law Jack on a fishing trip with him, a couple of his friends, and my sister. He came from money, so he always had an easy life, and ever since my sister married him, it's been the same for her. I packed everything I would need to spend the night on his boat in a small backpack. I drove out to the wealthier side of town by his house, which was by the bay. He lived right by the water, like it was actually in his backyard. He even had a small pre-built wooden dock leading to his luxurious boat with the name Lexi painted on, which is my sister's name. He was inspired by Forrest Gump to do that. He's living the dream life, that much I'm sure. We set sail early in the morning. He had packed tons of food and snacks, lots of hamburger meat because unsurprisingly, they had installed a barbecue onto the boat. They have always had to have everything that cost money, and it's always been infuriating. To be honest, a few hours into the trip, it wasn't even as fun as I thought it would be. Only one largemouth bass had been caught, and that was of course by Jack. They were all getting really drunk. I tried to persuade my sister to let me drink, but she kept scolding me, saying no, since I was only 17 at the time. She was always a nagging buzzkill, and at that moment, I was questioning why I even agreed to go with them. The only part of the trip I was enjoying was being able to relax and tan on the back deck of his unnecessarily large boat. The sky started to turn a beautiful orange as the sun began to set. Jack put the burgers on the grill, which to me seemed odd. 3 fish had been caught by that time, which would have been a perfect, more appropriate dinner, but I would definitely prefer burgers over fish, so I didn't complain. By the time we were done eating, it was dark out. There was something so calming yet unsettling about being in the middle of the ocean at night. It's almost like being in space. Nothing around you as far as the eye can see, and without your vessel, you'd be as good as dead. They were all insanely drunk and or high by now, blasting music and screaming and laughing. They eventually invited me to play Cards Against Humanity with them inside, so I did. I didn't have anything else to do anyway. There was an extra beer sitting on the counter by the small bar, so I just grabbed it. I was long past the point of caring now, and my sister was not in a state of mind to be nagging me anymore. About 3 beers in, I was finally able to loosen up and enjoy myself with a decent buzz. I had to lower the music a good amount earlier because I couldn't even hear myself talking. Jack and his buddies were completely shit-faced now. My sister was drunker than I'd ever seen her, but she wasn't quite as bad as them. It was fine though, they were all adults trying to have a good time, safe and secluded on a boat in calm waters, far from any land where they could cause anyone any harm. But things took a horribly unexpected turn. Over the now much lower music, me and one of Jack's friends noticed a noise coming from outside. I turned off the music completely. There was the sound of 2 men calling for help from outside. We all rushed outside, or at least I rushed to the side of the boat. There, over the ledge, was a much smaller boat with 2 Indian men looking up at us. I asked them what the problem was. One of them told us they were out of food and gas and needed help. I looked at everyone else. I didn't feel too good about this situation, but everyone else was not even close to a correct state of mind where they should be making important decisions. I felt like I had the burden of deciding what to do. Jack told them to wait there while he went to get the ladder. He tripped on his way and dropped his bottle of beer. I figured I would hate myself if I chose not to help 2 stranded seagoers, so I helped Jack in carrying the ladder over to the edge and hooking it to the railing. The 2 men climbed up on board and thanked all of us. Jack, my sister, and their friends couldn't even speak coherent sentences to the 2 men, so I had to apologize and told them they had a little too much to drink. The 2 men didn't even seem to acknowledge my statement. They looked at Jack and asked him if we had any extra food. We led them inside to the kitchen. Jack grabbed the leftover burgers from the counter and then shoveled them down. I didn't feel right about this situation. It made me uncomfortable. Jack clumsily handed them a jerry can full of gasoline, and the 2 men thanked us before climbing back down the ladder. I felt better now. We all went to sleep after that. Jack and my sister got the bedroom, while me and their 2 friends had to sleep on the pull-out cot and couches. I was rolling around the rock-hard couch for about an hour trying to get some sleep. I eventually had to get up to get a drink and use the bathroom. Jack told us to pee into the ocean to conserve the water on the boat. I opened the door expecting nothing but the sound of the calm water splashing, but instead, I heard the faint sound of a boat motor, along with the splashing of water that would come with a sailing boat. The pitch blackness surrounding the boat prohibited me from finding the source of the sound. I hopped up top by the controls and flipped on the switch for the searchlight. The beam of light provided the perfect amount to search the surrounding waters. Nothing so far. I turned it 90 degrees. Nothing. 180 degrees. Nothing. Then I reached about 3/4 of a whole spin around, and there was the boat from before. It was coming closer. And at that exact moment, I heard the gut-wrenching, blood-curdling scream of one of the guys from below.
It's hunting season!
I jumped all the way back down to deck level and ran back inside. One of Jack's friends was standing in the corner of the room, while the other was sitting up in reaction to the scream. That was followed by Jack and my sister bursting out of the bedroom to see what was going on. He formed a barely audible sentence, saying he saw two figures standing over him. They apparently ran out the front door to the deck. We all ran to see if they were still there, but they were nowhere in sight. I pointed them in the direction of where I saw the boat. The searchlight was still aimed in that exact position, but by then the boat was already gone. We never managed to find them after that. We searched high and low for what they could have stolen. All that we found was missing were a couple of cans of gasoline and Jack's wallet and keys, which he had left on the kitchen table. We had to speed all the way back to Jack's house that night. It took 4 hours to make it back, but nobody had broken in. He used the spare key hidden in the backyard to get inside. Jack and my sister had the lock changed the next day. The scary part, a few weeks ago, their camera systems caught two suspicious men wearing hoods walk up to their front door and seemingly attempt to unlock it, but failing, then quickly running off. We're 99% sure it was them. I was 21 years old and I was fishing with my 84-year-old grandfather for the first time. We took an hour-long drive from our suburban home to a more desolate part of the state. He always went fishing in this one particular lake that no one knew about, where he always managed to leave with coolers full of fish. My grandpa was a hardcore fisher, I'll say that right now. I never even knew there were different terms for the steps of fishing. He was throwing terms at me that I didn't understand left and right, even during the car ride there, which finally ended when we veered off the main quiet road and down about 2 miles of dirt trails. He parked his Jeep at the side of the trail, and from there we lugged a small boat through some dense forest. At 84 years old, my grandpa was no weakling. In fact, I was becoming exhausted from carrying the boat, but I didn't want to show him that by asking to stop for a break, because that would just be humiliating if he could lift it longer than I could. I'll skip ahead to when we were actually sitting in the boat fishing. So he just got done showing me how to actually get the line and the hook in the water. After that, he didn't say a thing. He seemed to be concentrating really hard on what he was doing. I turned around to ask him a question. He seemed to be leaning in, focusing on something in the water. He didn't respond to my question, so I just resumed concentration on the water,